Welcome to the Quest Forums channel, and you see the title of this video. Come on, it's 2019. Have you ever heard that in conversation or maybe in another video or some piece of writing where somebody will use that in order to attack someone else's position, in order to offer criticism of it? And you don't have to be a Christian to see this. Anybody can be criticized with this, but we are the ones who probably do hear it the most. It's basically a way to try to tell us that our sense of morality is a relic of the past and we need to give it up and get with the times. But the thing about it that I want to ask today, is it really persuasive? It does have a lot of force. Our culture sends this message all the time that we need to keep up. But does it actually mean anything? And what does it mean? And I just want to kind of draw this to our attention. And maybe if you've ever used this criticism, that you might think it through a little more deeply, or maybe if you've ever heard it, that you might really give some thought to why you believe what you do rather than being concerned about peer pressure. So what does it mean? Obviously, nothing on its own. It's as much as saying that it's Tuesday or commenting on the fact that it's August. It doesn't mean anything other than that you can count time, but it has this implication, obviously, in it that says that biblical morality is something that we've moved on from, that it's not something that we rely upon anymore, and that we can move forward from it and we don't have to stay with it. But what we need to know is that morality is about truth. It's not about time. It's not something that changes because the year changes. It's something that's always there because it depends upon nature and on natural laws. And so this statement that people will make, all it conveys is their belief that the latest is the greatest. And if you were to push most people on it, now a few will be able to tell you what it means and where this idea comes from, but most won't. Most are just following a cultural cue. They don't actually have a well thought out position. But I actually do have a little bit of knowledge about this. I know part of where this came from. I dive into it a little bit more in the article itself, but it's sort of the meeting of a number of philosophical streams. First of all, progressivism, which I'm using as an umbrella term. There's a lot more that goes into that, but just the idea that history is always moving us forward, and we are constantly progressing toward a state of basically utopia. That's kind of the general idea behind that political philosophy. And then there's scientism, which is the belief that science has done so much good for us in its ability to answer the question of how things work, that people have started to have faith in it to actually be able to tell us why things are the way they are, which is not something that science is really up to. It's about evidence, it's not about meaning. And so it can't do that under any circumstances, but a lot of people trust in it to do so. And then finally, there's postmodernism. Now, postmodernism is interesting because it's actually kind of a reaction to those earlier beliefs. It was a reaction to modern thought and to its confidence that said we could figure everything out and control everything around us. And postmodernism kind of realized that that confidence was misplaced, but instead of turning and saying, well, we need God to be part of our explanation, they said, there's no truth to be known. Everything is relative, and there's nothing to rely upon, and there's no right or wrong. And these ideas, most people in culture do not hold firmly to one. They hold loosely to all three. And it makes for a pretty inconsistent mixture, because these belief systems are not really even consistent in and of themselves. And then yet alone, they're not consistent with each other. They don't mix together very well, but it really just becomes a matter of jumping from one to another whenever you reach a criticism that you don't really know how to answer. So if you were to ask them a question, a question, something along the lines of how does history actually define goodness? They'll move to say, well, science has done us a lot of good, so we can trust in it in order to provide our answers. And if you say, well, science has and can do a lot of evil too, so why should we trust in it? Then they'll move on to say, well, what do you mean by evil? There's no way to know the difference between right and wrong. Now they're in postmodernism. So maybe you ask, well, postmodernism has no way to provide meaning in life. And that's just an evidence. It's something that exists in nature that we require meaning, we require purpose. So where does that come from according to postmodernism? And they'll move and they'll say, well, we've moved on from the need for that type of understanding. We're past that. It's 2019. So you see that everything's gone in a circle by this point. You've gone from progressivism to scientism to postmodernism back to progressivism, and you've not actually gained any answers to any of the questions you asked of the philosophy that you started with in any of those points. They just move on to the next one. They move the goalposts without actually providing solutions to these philosophical problems. And so it's sort of a pop culture philosophy, and it's shared very broadly in the culture, which makes it so people have confidence in it, overconfidence in it. And that's where you can get a statement where somebody criticizes you by telling you what year it is, and then acts as though they've scored a point against you. It's really a naive arrogance. It's telling you is that they believe that today's better than yesterday, and tomorrow is going to be better than today. But it doesn't give you answers. It doesn't actually tell you about right or wrong or about what's necessary. It doesn't tell you why it should be so, that the future is better than the past. Now, biblical Christianity is obviously very different. For us, time is secondary to truth. Now, I don't think I mentioned his name earlier in this recording, but progressivism, what I did say about it is that it's kind of been built in a long philosophical chain, and one of the people who put in an early link was a guy by the name of G.W.F. Hegel. And Hegel was kind of the one who first developed the idea that history was this force that was pushing us constantly forward in improvement. And he actually had a verse of the Bible that helped him develop that theory. It was Galatians chapter 4, verse 4. I'm going to read that and verse 5 as well from the New King James Version. It says, "When the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that we might receive the adoption as sons." Now, in those verses, it should hopefully be clear what the Apostle Paul was trying to get across, but somehow someone as brilliant as Hegel completely missed the point. He, not just with this verse, obviously, but partially with this verse, he built an entire philosophy around the idea of the fullness of time. And that was where he drove from, was saying that when history reached the point that it was ready for the next development, then it pushed it forward. But that's not what Paul's talking about here. The point in this passage is not time. It's the Son of God. It's the work of Jesus Christ. That's the center of history. That's the most important thing that had ever happened to that point and will ever happen. That's the point of the gospel. And it was always God's plan. God wasn't changing things as he went along. This was what was supposed to happen, was that God would redeem humanity through his Son. So the truth did not change with the time. It only became better known, but it was still always true until it was ultimately revealed in the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. That's what we can know on the basis of the fact that Christ rose from the dead as he promised that he would do. And so this is what I'm trying to drive home that Christians need to cling to. And maybe if you're someone who has been using this argument against Christian morality, that you would understand where you've been coming from, to at least try to explain it better, and also to review your beliefs and review our beliefs, is that what we believe is that God's will does not change with every January. That the year it is does not matter as far as what truth is, because truth always stays the same. And that's because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that's in Hebrews chapter 13. Now, if you're a believer, you might get called out on the basis of time. You stand a good chance of that. But remember, where you stand is on an eternal foundation when you're standing with God. So know what you believe and why you believe it. And then you'll be able to take the criticisms. And you'll also be in a position to show other people that they're on shaky ground. And that's something that we do all need to be prepared to do. You know, not everyone's going to be into philosophy, but just know what you believe and be able to talk about it and to be able to answer criticisms. That's a responsibility that we do all have. But I thank you very much for checking out this video. It may have raised some questions, and if it did, I hope that you'll send them to me. I'd be happy to discuss those or any others that you might have about the Bible or about your relationship with God. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like with the thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to the channel as well. That'll help it to continue to grow. But until next time, keep looking up.